Despite what a lot of D&D content creators are saying, Thieves Tools have been nerfed by the new player's handbook, and they've been nerfed pretty hard. Hello everyone, this is the Bovine Terror, and today we'll be talking about how the player's handbook has indirectly and accidentally weakened Thieves Tools in D&D 5th edition. To start, what exactly makes Thieves Tools useful? This may seem obvious, but it's important to understand this when we look at the nerfs. Thieves Tools are typically used as a resource-free, stealthy method to lockpick things and disarm traps, with lockpicking being the most common and useful utility they brought to a party. Rogues and artificers can be extra good with these tools since they get proficiency with them for free at level 1, even if you multiclass into them, and both can get expertise with these tools. There are other ways to get through locks and disarm traps, but they usually aren't resourceless, are loud, or have other downsides. For instance, spells like Misty Step and Knock can get you past doors or out of restraints, and can maybe be done stealthily with certain build options, but it takes a level 2 spell slot, and for most builds are pretty loud and flashy, so it certainly isn't resourceless and usually isn't stealthy. As for traps, these come in a lot of varieties, but there are a lot of spells that can deal with them pretty well, either by spraying them or navigating past them. But again, that means this isn't resourceless, and sometimes triggering traps is very loud. Not to mention that if you leave a trap armed, it may cut off your escape if you need to retreat through the same area, so being able to quietly disarm the traps is a very useful skill to possess. There are also mundane objects that can do similar things to Thieves Tools, such as crowbars and portable rams, but these are strength specific, not always stealthy, and can't have your proficiency bonus added to their checks rules as written, so it'll be a lot harder to succeed opening locks using these over Thieves Tools. Speaking of ability score dependent things, Thieves Tools checks have historically been conducted through either a dexterity check, an intelligence check, a wisdom check, or a sleight of hand check, where all of these checks got to add a creature's proficiency bonus with Thieves Tools to the check. So there was a lot of flexibility in how a character could use these. Even if how they were used came down to DM discretion, there was always a possibility that you could argue for whatever ability check gave you the highest bonus. Additionally, Xanathar's Guide to Everything added a bunch of additional features to all tool proficiencies to actually make them useful and interesting. If you want to hear more about this in detail, I'm making a video on how Xanathar's and the new player's handbook tool proficiency rules work together, and I currently have a podcast episode on my Spotify channel, Bastiles and Brontotheres, that goes way more in depth on how tool proficiencies work in 5th edition. Both will eventually be linked in the description below if you want to check them out. They're very cool videos/episodes. Thieves Tools in Xanathar's gave you extra abilities, including 3 associated skills that made it much easier to find traps, to find information on places renowned for their traps, and an ability to craft your own traps as part of a short rest that actually have the capacity to do decent damage depending on how your dungeon master rules ambiguous parts of these traps. And that's pretty much all the things the old Thieves Tools could be used for. Now let's get into what's changed. Before we get into the nerfs, I want to talk about how Thieves Tools were buffed in the new player's handbook, because they did receive one important buff. This buff comes from the new utilize actions that all tools now have if you have proficiency with that tool and have the tool on hand. Thieves Tools received 2 things they can do with this utilize action: pick locks and disarm traps. Both call for a dexterity check with a DC of 15. Now, this doesn't seem that different from what you would normally do with Thieves Tools, but the key is that locks and traps used to have variable DCs, and now they seem to have a set one of 15 based on their entry in the tools section, and also the DC for all mundane equipment that have locks are all 15. And 15 isn't very high, meaning Thieves Tools are more reliable than they used to be. This obviously can change based on DM discretion if they choose to change the DC. However, this can be said of all rules, so I'm going to assume throughout this video that most people are using this DC rules as written the vast majority of the time, because I don't really see many issues with implementing this rule, and if anything, I think a lot of DMs will appreciate not needing to come up with DCs on the fly as often as they used to. There's also another potential buff applied to Thieves Tools that seems to be an implied rule, but not a rules as written rule that I want to mention here. And that is that lockpicking and trap disarming checks are no longer a Thieves Tools check, but a sleight of hand check that you can use your proficiency with Thieves Tools to aid with the check. This seems to be implied because all the entries for mundane items that you might be able to lockpick, like a lock and manacles, specify that you can optionally use Thieves Tools to make a DC 15 sleight of hand check to unlock the items. This means that, at least with manacles and locks, when you're trying to unlock them and you both have proficiency with and have these tools on hand, you can make the check adding a proficiency bonus with either sleight of hand or Thieves Tools, whichever is higher if you happen to have expertise or something similar. And then, if you have proficiency with both sleight of hand and Thieves Tools, then you can make this check with your highest proficiency bonus and advantage with a set DC of 15. A tool check, for those who don't know, is like a skill check, but specifically with tools. It's a type of ability check, which includes tool checks, skill checks, and other checks the DM can call for, where you add a specific ability modifier to the check, and then, at DM discretion, you may add your proficiency bonus or any other features to the check. That's why, when 5th edition material calls for a skill check, it always words it as ability parentheses skill, like make a dexterity parentheses sleight of hand check, or a strength parentheses athletics check. So, if we were to word a tool check in this way, it would be structured as ability parentheses tool. Examples interpreted from the player's handbook would be make a wisdom parentheses cook's utensils check, a charisma parentheses disguise kit check, and a strength parentheses carpenter's tools check. Alternatively, as implied by the player's handbook and clarified by Xanathars, the DM can call for a skill check that's relevant to a tool, and then you can use either your proficiency bonus with the skill or the tool, and if you have both, you also get to roll with advantage. However, despite this being rules as written, this specific format of ability parentheses tool is not written down anywhere in the player's handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide, at least as far as I can tell. Because this isn't written down explicitly anywhere, it creates confusion when the only place using a tool is mentioned in an ability check in relation to anything other than the tools section are Thieves Tools in the lock and manacles section, and in both they use a sleight of hand check supported by Thieves Tools with exactly the same DC that Thieves Tools state in their utilize action section. Does this mean that the devs intended for all lockpicking and trap disarming rolls to be sleight of hand checks supported by Thieves Tools and just didn't say that expressly? Or are these just special rules for only locks and manacles? And in other sections in the player's handbook, it seems to imply the opposite, that skill and tool checks are inherently separate and are only combined if the DM allows it. For instance, the rogue's reliable talent specifies that whenever you make an ability check that uses one of your skill or tool proficiencies, you can treat a d20 roll of 9 or lower as a 10. This clearly shows that the devs intended for skill checks and tool checks to both be called for and to inherently be separate by default, but if this is what they intended, why don't they clarify this better? And why are the lock and manacle entries not just a Thieves Tools check instead of a sleight of hand check supported by Thieves Tools? And I know in the end it's up to DM discretion, but DMs and players look to these books for rule clarifications, and I feel like this was kind of a big oversight because tools have historically been poorly understood mechanically in 5th edition, and still are, unfortunately. In the end, I think how Thieves Tools are implemented in your game will just come down to DM discretion as to whether or not you'll get to make lockpicking and trap disarming checks as a Thieves Tools check, or as a sleight of hand check. If it's the latter, then you get to have a much bigger bonus to lockpicking and trap disarming that will synergize with existing abilities much better than the former. And this is the end of the buffs they got, and to be honest, these buffs have some nerfs included with them that we will discuss in a sec. Now on to the nerfs, which I should state now are all indirect and I'm almost 100% sure are accidental. To start, Thieves Tools are now no longer the only way to have a resourceless, stealthy method to open doors or containers. These other methods also largely have no downsides compared to Thieves Tools, and honestly have a lot of upsides that make them a better choice over Thieves Tools in a lot of situations. Let me introduce you to Carpenter's Tools. Before the new player's handbook, Carpenter's Tools were a really good tool proficiency, but whose abilities had very little overlap with Thieves Tools. The new player's handbook, however, has changed this drastically. Now, Carpenter's Tools have the ability to attempt to pry open a door or container with a DC 20 strength check with a utilize action. Now, yes, this DC is a lot higher than with Thieves Tools, and I imagine this was an attempt to balance the two tools. However, I think they neglected to account for two mundane items that synergize with Carpenter's Tools really well: crowbars and portable rams. Crowbars provide advantage on any strength checks where they could feasibly be utilized, such as opening a door or unlocking a container, which kind of encompasses most of the things you typically would lockpick in this game. Additionally, a portable ram adds a +4 to a strength check made to break down a door, and has a built-in feature for another creature to help, providing advantage as well on the check. So what ends up happening is that if a door is locked and can be opened by force or lockpicked, you now have two stealthy and resourceless options. One, use Thieves Tools where you can add your proficiency bonus and dexterity to the check with a DC of 15, or two, use Carpenter's Tools where you can add your proficiency bonus, strength, and use a portable ram with help from a friend to get an additional +4 added advantage with a DC of 20. So let's assume two characters are attempting this check. The one with Thieves Tools proficiency has a proficiency bonus of +3 and a dexterity modifier of +3, while the one with Carpenter's Tools has a proficiency bonus of +3 and a strength modifier of +3, so we're on equal footing in this comparison. The chances for the character with Thieves Tools succeeding this check is 60%, and the chances for the character with Carpenter's Tools succeeding this check is 79.75%. Which suddenly means that the strength-based carpenter is better at opening doors than the dexterity-based thief. And that is a problem, because Thieves Tools are supposed to be the best option for getting into locked doors, short of using spells. Now, yes, you can technically get another creature to use the help action and help the character with Thieves Tools to give them advantage on the check, but to be honest, I don't know how many DMs would even allow that. To use the help action, you need to actually be able to assist in some way, and I don't know how someone would help someone else with lockpicking a door. It's kind of a one-person job. However, this advantage can be gained pretty easily if your DM is allowing you to make a sleight of hand check that's supported with Thieves Tools, granting you proficiency at advantage on the check as long as you also have proficiency with sleight of hand. I should also mention that if this is allowed, it's likely the character with Carpenter's Tools can make an athletics check that's supported by Carpenter's Tools, meaning they can gain advantage without another creature helping them as long as they have proficiency in athletics. So advantage can be gained with Carpenter's Tools in more ways than with Thieves Tools. So if you can gain advantage in some way with Thieves Tools, or if in this situation neither individual can get advantage through skill checks or with another creature helping, then the character with Thieves Tools has a 60% chance without advantage and an 84% chance with advantage, while the one with Carpenter's Tools has a 55% chance without advantage and a 79.75% chance with advantage. And actually, if the character with Carpenter's Tools can't get help from someone else or get advantage through associated skills, it's better they switch over to using the crowbar instead of the portable ram, since advantage and no +4 is 57.75% instead of 55%. And while it's true the character with Thieves Tools now has a higher chance to open the door in both situations, it's only by 2.25 to 4.25%. Less than a 5% difference. And this means that Thieves Tools are simply less effective overall because something else is invading their niche and is often more effective than they are at the thing they do best. Now, this is only with doors. Thieves Tools are also great at opening locked containers, like treasure chests and lockboxes. So how do Carpenter's Tools fare here? Well, they still can use a crowbar to get advantage on the check without the help of another creature, or with associated skills. They just can't get that +4 that the portable ram provides. Now, this does mean that Thieves Tools will come out on top of these checks with a 60% chance to open the container, but Carpenter's Tools aren't far behind with a 57.75% chance, just 2.25% behind. The gap is a lot bigger if the character with Thieves Tools can get advantage on the check, then it skyrockets to 84%, which is a 26.25% lead. So this one is pretty significant. So even though Thieves Tools are winning in this department, Carpenter's Tools are still making Thieves Tools weaker because they're almost as good at the things Thieves Tools are specialized to do. Now, of course, Thieves Tools are more than just lockpicking. They're also great at disarming, gaining information about, and creating traps. And Carpenter's Tools don't do any of these things. However, Carpenter's Tools do things Thieves Tools do not as well, and frankly, their abilities are better. They give you lots of additional information while within or on wooden structures, or about the wooden structures themselves. They can seal a door, window, or container in 2 separate ways that result in differing effects. They can boost stealth checks while walking on wooden floors. They can craft wooden objects, including a portable ram, so their crafting can boost themselves. And they can quickly build simple wooden structures. Some of these abilities are certainly better than others, as Cowspook has indicated here, but there are just more useful abilities that Carpenter's Tools bring to the table for more characters and in more situations than Thieves Tools bring. Since these abilities are just going to be useful more often than the things with traps, it just makes Carpenter's Tools a better version of Thieves Tools in most situations. Even just the stealth bonus aspect that Carpenter's Tools provide is so useful for pretty much any build that it often will overshadow all the trap finding, disarming, arming, and information gathering utility the Thieves Tools bring. And this is ignoring the superior information gathering capabilities of Carpenter's Tools and all the other more niche things they provide. And I've neglected to mention, Carpenter's Tools are not the only tools that gain the ability to directly compete with Thieves' Tools. Smith's Tools also can attempt to pry open a door or container with a DC 20 strength check that can benefit from a crowbar and a portable ram. So now these tools have 2 competing tool proficiencies for the same niche. This just weakens them even more because smith's tools are a very commonly gained tool proficiency, and now a lot more builds will have access to this niche, including, notably, Rune Knight fighters at level 3, who, if they take the Fire rune, which is one of the coolest and most useful runes, grants expertise with all tool checks using tools they're proficient in, meaning the previous character who was using carpenter's tools, who is now using smith's tools granted by being a Rune Knight, who had a 57.75% chance to open a container and a 79.75% chance to open a door, now increases to a 75% chance to open a container and a 91% chance to open a door. Also, with the Rune Knight's ability Giant's Might, it's really easy for them to gain advantage on strength checks with the portable ram, even if they're alone and can't gain associated skill bonuses, so they'll pretty much always have that 91% against doors if they want to take it. To top all this off, Rune Knights can also take the Frost rune, and if they invoke it, will grant them an additional +2 to their strength checks for 10 minutes, which means their chances are even higher if they take this too. Like, suddenly Rune Knights have fully surpassed the lockpicking capabilities of rogues with 0 build considerations. In fact, even if rogues optimize, they still can't surpass the lockpicking power of Rune Knights. Under ideal conditions, if your DM allows lockpicking checks to be done as a sleight of hand check, and the rogue takes sleight of hand as one of their expertise skills, they will still fall behind Rune Knights even if they can't pry open a door with an athletics check in the same way the rogues are getting to with sleight of hand. Well, technically an optimized Soul Knife rogue can surpass Rune Knights under those conditions, but only this subclass can do it. Only when optimized rogues reach level 7 do they technically surpass Rune Knights due to reliable talent granting them a high enough bonus to automatically succeed any Thieves Tools checks, even though Rune Knights still have a higher bonus, even accounting for the increased DC of Smith's Tools. And this isn't even me trying to say that, like, new rogues are bad. I actually love the new rogues, and I think they're a good class. They're definitely not the worst class like most of the internet is saying. All I'm pointing out here is that Thieves Tools, even when optimized, are sometimes weaker at circumventing locks than Smith's Tools and Carpenter's Tools. And that was a niche Thieves Tools held alone for like a decade, which inherently makes them weaker. And speaking of expertise with Thieves Tools, guess who can't gain that anymore? Rogues. Rogues no longer can choose to gain expertise with Thieves Tools, they can only choose skills. This is yet another indirect nerf to Thieves Tools. This used to be a way at level 1 to gain a huge boost to lockpicking, trap detection, and trap disarming that now does not exist. You can still get it for detecting traps since perception and investigation are associated skills for Thieves Tools, and once again, if your DM allows lockpicking checks to be a sleight of hand check aided by Thieves Tools, then you can get expertise with lockpicking, but this really hurts how good Thieves Tools can be since one of the 3 official options to get expertise with them is now gone, and it can't be done until the earliest at level 3. And you can't even do it with a rogue unless you multiclass or choose the right species. Plus, if one of the 2 ways to get expertise with Thieves Tools is through Rune Knight fighters, and they baseline gain Smith's Tools, which already can do some of the most important things Thieves Tools can do, and synergize with their subclass abilities better than Thieves Tools, then why waste a tool proficiency or feat picking them up? We reach yet another nerf to Thieves Tools, that being they now must always use dexterity checks instead of anything else. I and other DMs I've played with used to rule that artificers could use intelligence for checks with Thieves Tools, since that just kind of makes sense for them. It's not a nimbleness thing, it's a years of tinkering, studying, and practice kind of thing. Now though, they can't do that. It has to be their dexterity, which for most artificer builds will be at best their 3rd highest ability score, and likely lower than that, which means they just won't be typically adding much to their Thieves Tools checks in regard to their ability scores. Oh yeah, and another thing that I loved doing with artificers, but it also applies to any build that gets access to the guidance cantrip, guidance can no longer boost Thieves Tools checks since now guidance specifies that you need to choose a skill to be boosted, and tool checks aren't skill checks. I used to always cast guidance on myself as an artificer when I was lockpicking, that way I got that boost to the ability check, but no longer can we do that, which just, again, nerfs Thieves Tools a little bit more. This one's pretty minor, and of course it can be circumvented if your DM allows lockpicking checks to be a sleight of hand check aided by Thieves Tools, since now the roll is a skill check and can therefore be boosted by guidance, but I'm upset about the change and technically it's relevant, so I'm adding it in here. Oh, the Dungeon Master's Guide got released? Oh cool, let's have a look at that and see if they added anything more about opening doors, picking locks, or disarming traps. Okay, they do actually have stuff. Oh. they have variable DCs for breaking down and lockpicking doors. So this whole video just isn't correct then? None of what we talked about was set DCs, and all the math we did is just pointless? Well, not really. It seems like the variable DCs are just about how difficult the door is to force open or how complex the lock is, and they vary from 10 to 25 for forcing them open and 10 to 20 for lockpicking them. The low DCs are for forcing open glass doors or lockpicking inferior locks, so I kind of doubt these will matter much anyways, since they 1, probably won't come up often, and 2, are really easy to succeed regardless of which tool you use. The DC 15 plus ones are for wood, stone, and metal doors, or good to superior locks, which are probably a lot more commonly encountered and actually matter when you're playing. In this case, wood doors will pretty much always be easier to open with carpenter's tools or smith's tools, since you can get a reliably much higher bonus with them, and their DC is only 15 using carpenter's or smith's tools, and it's a 15 plus with thieves tools. Then with stone doors, it's still usually best to use carpenter's tools or smith's tools because that DC is 20, and we've been talking about how much higher of a bonus you can reliably get trying to meet a DC 20 this whole video, and at best, thieves tools have to meet a DC 15 to open the door, but they might have to meet a DC 20, and then they certainly are at a disadvantage. With metal doors, it probably goes to thieves tools, since they may only need to meet a DC 15, while carpenters and smith's tools need to meet a 25. Though if the lock is superior, we're kind of in the same boat as the rest of this video, except the DC of both tools has increased by 5, meaning that usually carpenters and smith's tools will be better, but some situations will mean thieves tools are better. And again, not saying thieves tools are strictly worse than carpenters or smith's tools, it's just that they're worse in some situations, and particularly of note, are not the only reliable mundane option to open doors and containers, which they pretty much were the only way in 2014. I will say, I actually love that now each tool has a niche where they're better depending on the situation. It adds interesting variety to the game where different characters can specialize in different situations, and it lets multiple options be optimal in different situations, which is so much better than having one meta choice. Hi, Future Bovine Terror here. The Dungeon Master's Guide came with yet another nerf to Thieves Tools that I did not notice upon my first read through, and that is that disarming traps is now pretty much always a sleight of hand check that can be supported with Thieves Tools and not a Thieves Tools check. So now we have direct clarification that opening locked doors, picking locks, unlocking manacles, and disarming traps are all sleight of hand checks, which leaves Thieves Tools with nothing. I mean, you still get the bonuses to see traps and can create your own traps, though the rules for that are extremely vague, and so it's hard to use that ability anyway. And if you have them, you get advantage on those sleight of hand checks. But all of this is just kind of nice. It's not the proficiency you take to be a good lockpicker and trap disarmer. That's sleight of hand now. And yes, you could always substitute Thieves Tools proficiency for sleight of hand proficiency if you don't have proficiency with sleight of hand, or if your proficiency bonus with Thieves Tools is higher, though the only way this can ever happen in 2024 is if you play a Rune Knight, and then we'd still have the issues we discussed earlier with them getting Smith's Tools by default. But the issue with this is that just means Thieves Tools are convenient, not the option to be the party's lockpicker and trap disarmer. Now, it's way better to just take sleight of hand proficiency, because you get a lot more utility out of that than you do Thieves Tools. And then you can optionally take Thieves Tools if you want to boost your lockpicking prowess, but it's sleight of hand that you're going for here, which is objectively a nerf from 2014. Thieves Tools went from being the lockpicking option to just a booster to the real option, sleight of hand proficiency. So yeah, yet one more nerf I wanted to point out in the future. Anyway, back to present day Bovine Terror. Now, I've been pretty harsh to Thieves Tools here, but I'm just saying they've been nerfed. I'm not saying they're bad now. Quite far from it, actually. They're still really powerful and still do things nothing else can in the combinations they can do them. Despite all the things I've talked about with Carpenter's Tools and Smith's Tools, both of these rely on strength, and if you're a dexterity-based character, Thieves Tools are going to be more useful for you, at least for lockpicking. Carpenter's Tools may still be better because they provide stealth bonuses, which I think are usually more powerful than lockpicking and trap disarming, but that's just me. Plus, using a crowbar or a portable ram isn't as quiet as picking a lock, it's still the stealthiest, resourceless option. Plus, you don't get Carpenter's Tools proficiency for free much at all. There are no classes or subclasses that grant you proficiency, but there are several that give you Thieves Tools. And Smith's Tools, while still able to open doors and containers like Carpenter's Tools, are frankly a mid-tool proficiency, and are overall a lot less powerful than Thieves Tools, which still remain in the top 10 best tool proficiencies, even if they're no longer in the top 5. It may just not be worth it to spend a feat or something like that picking up Carpenter's Tools just to have a little bit better chance to open doors or containers if you already have Thieves Tools. Plus, there may be times where you can pick a lock, but it's not on a door or container. Things like manacles may be too difficult to employ a crowbar without hurting whoever's trapped inside them, and depending on your DM, they may not even allow attempting to use Carpenter's Tools or Smith's Tools to open the manacles, since manacles probably don't count as a container and they certainly aren't a door. And Thieves Tools are small and discreet, something you could sneak into a place with little suspicion, whereas Carpenter's Tools, Smith's Tools, a crowbar, and a portable ram are all probably too big and bulky to sneak in discreetly. So keep using Thieves Tools when they're the best option, but at least now you know that there may be some better options out there depending on your build and the situation. And maybe the best thing you can do is just have Carpenter's Tools and Thieves Tools, and just use whichever one is better for the situation you find yourself in. That gives you a lot of flexibility and the benefits of both tools. If you'd like to hear more about tool proficiencies or D&D in general, because I will be making more content on this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, watch my other D&D videos, and head over to Bastiles and Brontotheres, my Spotify D&D podcast, and give that a follow. Links to all this are in the description below. So, go ahead and milk that subscribe button, ring that cowbell, utterly smash that like button, tip your cow into the comments, and finally, thank you all for watching, and have a great, great life, everyone.